Welcome to the Business Trendsetter Podcast Innovators Series. Insights and unconventional wisdom from innovators driving success through embracing trends. Welcome your host, Manny Turan from Spark Partners. Welcome to the show. In today's episode, we have a special guest. We have MollyGravatt, who is the founder of Radiant Dev. And there's some exciting things we'd like to talk about with her background, where she came from, and really to understand the story behind the story. So without further ado, Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Manny.
Great. So, a lot of people that are in business today are really don't have a lot of mentors. They look online, they look at books, they look at friends, and they kind of piece together mentorship. And our audience really spans across many industries, whether it be your industry or maybe it's something more retail or maybe government or B2B. And so tell us a little bit about your background, Molly, sort of what your business does. And then after that, we'll kind of dive into your background.
Perfect. So yes, Radiant Dev is my company, and we are focused on technology staffing. So for us, that means we are helping clients with hiring. Oftentimes it's engineering in the technical sector, software, DevOps, project program management, and essentially we're in the people business on both sides. So we're recruiting candidates on one side, and on the other side, we're working with customers to help build out high-performing teams of engineers and key players at the core level.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And having run and currently running a technology business, I know that the number one thing behind, of course, the customers, that's the most important, is the people, because the people make the business. People are the ones that do all the stuff and make things happen. And so this is kind of an interesting line of work. What led you to start the business?
Such a great question. I think it is an interesting one that I like to ask people as well when they start into the industry. A lot of times it's on accident. I feel like it is becoming more common as a profession over the last 15 years. But when I started, it was still relatively new. So when I stepped into this role, I had I played volleyball in college, and I coached for a year at K-State in Manhattan, and then decided I didn't want volleyball to be my entire life. And so it was through an introduction that I got referred into the industry and thought, this seems cool. I like the people that I would be working with, and knew nothing about technology, but I figured the worst that would happen is I would work with great people, and I would be interacting with so many cool companies that I would have the ability to land a job. That was my thinking when I started. Luckily, I jumped in and did well, and the rest is history.
Well, I love your mindset of the worst that can happen. That's something that I use all the time in my career is like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I can grow and increase my network and become a better person. If that's the worst that can happen, I mean, the sky's up from there.
100%.
So it sounds like you were in a corporate role, doing staffing and so forth. And how long did you do that?
So yes, I was part of a large organization. So they're one of the big ones in the industry. Aerotech Tech Systems, Allegis Group is the big parent company. And I was with them for about 10 years and worked my way up from recruiting, just working with the candidates, understanding their business and helping bring them to the table for the customer. And where my sweet spot is building relationships, getting to know people, understanding what's important. And that led me into sales, where I just fell in love. I love everything about it, the challenge, the competitiveness, and the just the ability to make a difference, right? For the customer, the people that they hire, and this is still true today, and part of the reason I still love it is that when you bring great people to a team, the dynamic changes. It's actually true either way. If they're good or bad, the dynamic of the organization changes, and those people can be catalysts and game changers, or they can be horrible for the organization. Yeah. So I learned early that what we do in this industry does make a difference, and the chance to make a positive impact on the engineers and consultants that we place is also huge, right? They can go from a lower paying job or not having a job to earning very well for themselves and their family. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it's great. I do want to go into some of the more nitty gritty nature of how that works. If they become a gig worker, are they a 1099, and how that works. But I first want to ask, first want to say this, that sales is one of these things that historically has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And the more, I mean, I grew up in a small business family. My mom had a small business, my grandmother. And so it wasn't really these are all restaurants. So sales for a restaurant is more on the advertising and marketing side. You're not out there getting people inside the door per se. But what I did learn when I became a sales guy after my engineering career is that, just like you said, the connection, the people, the impact you make is fantastic.
Yep.
And so with that, let me ask you this. So you're doing this for 10 years, you were working for one of the big companies, and there must have been a point in time or a moment or a situation that led you to make that jump from an employee to an entrepreneur, business starter, business owner. What was that all about?
I mean, this would need 5 episodes.
Okay, I love it.
But the short and condensed version is that I went through a divorce, and there were so many things during that time that shook who I was as a person. And, you know, the phrase that through much therapy, I learned what is supposed to be, right? I had all these preconceived notions about how life is supposed to go and what is supposed to be. And the truth is there's no such thing. Life is what you make it, and the choices and the decisions that you make. And so during that time, I questioned everything and said, you know, is this what I want to do? And I'm fortunate that my partner, my husband now, who I met through that discovery process, was and continues to be my biggest supporter. And he was the one that said, you seem like you're unhappy in this path, right? You're doing well, but you're not loving it like you used to. Why don't you start your own thing? And it was such an aha moment, and one that I don't know that I ever would have gotten to on my own. He had gone through many startups and opportunities growing up. He's an engineer, and like I said, he's my biggest fan. So I'm lucky to have him in my corner. And we talked about what's the worst thing that can happen? He was earning well and said, if you fall down, what if you just have to go get another job? Would that be so horrible? And that was the biggest turning point. And I'm glad I said yes.
Yeah, that's really fascinating that a lot of people think that entrepreneurship is, although it does feel lonely at times, it isn't something that you start alone, and you need to have a network of people, and support is big time.
Yeah.
And I too started my entrepreneurial career as a kind of I wouldn't call it a mistake, but kind of by accident. That's a better word.
Yep.
I had a corporate job. I was building a new division of a company. I moved back to Tucson, my hometown, if you will. And this is back in 2009. The economy was going down in spirals, and there was no super high paying job in Tucson like I had before. And I said, what am I going to do? And my wife at the time said, look, what's the worst that can happen? We took that step forward, and then I started my company as Terra, and I grew it, and then it failed, and so all that are life lessons, and so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I still want to get to the nitty gritty, but I just had something else pop in my mind. Okay, say you could whisper in your ear during that transition of wanting to, or maybe month one of doing this on your own, when there's fear is outweighing confidence, and maybe the phone isn't ringing or the emails aren't coming in as much as they are now and all that. So what would you tell yourself back month one of having started Radiant Dev?
Oh, man. First of all, I spent many a day and evening crying in that basement office because it was hard, and entrepreneurship is hard. It's a crazy, wild ride. But if I had the ability to go back, I would tell myself to remove the just the preconceived notions, right? The thing I spent the most time on early is a little bit embarrassing. I was worried about the presentation of the company and who I was, right? I was worried about business cards. I was worried about the story and the messaging. And those are important things, right? To have your pitch ready and presentable, but it's so much less important than on the sales side, right? Connecting and being authentic and getting to know people. And guess what? Sharing your story and your vulnerability is sometimes your biggest strength. And so if I could go back and guide myself in that regard, that's the recommendation I would have.
That's fantastic. And this is, in a way, you're whispering to the ear of countless people right now that might be struggling in that domain. There's that great book, Think and Grow Rich, and there's a story about 3 feet from gold, about this guy that was digging a mine, and he invested all his life savings in getting all this equipment, and he was digging and digging and digging, and he got basically 3 feet from gold, and he quit.
Yeah.
And then he sold everything else, and then somebody came out in and dug 3 feet and found a whole vein of gold, and so that's golden, Molly. That's super golden. And so I really appreciate your vulnerability. That's one thing also that I have to say about the people in my personal network, the ones that connect with me and vice versa, and I would include you in that. We become friends, is that level of vulnerability. And that, in my opinion, has its own form of currency. With that, you're very wealthy and abundant, not only on the financial side, but just your ability to connect. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
So back to the original question. So, at Spark Partners, we talk a lot about trends. We talk about a lot of these big market drivers like AI, like the gig economy, like connectedness, the environment, demographics. We can spend episodes upon hours talking about trends, but I think your business is interesting because I want to understand how AI plays into your business. I want to understand how demographics play in your business. And my first question has to do with the gig side. Are the people you place, are they gig workers, or do they become W-2, or how does that work?
Yep. Great question. So for the way that we run our business, when we put people to work, they are either on our W-2, or they are, if they have their own LLC or 1099, we employ a certain percentage in that fashion. And it really mostly depends on their preference. Sometimes it depends on whether or not we're lined up to do business in that state and whether or not we want to take on that additional responsibility from, a tax and overhead perspective. So there's a few different factors that come in. With the gig economy or gig workers, there's hardly any of that. So every once in a while, we have a client that comes in and says, hey, we have some fractional work that needs to happen. But it's still consistent, right? It's not like, okay, 5 hours this week and 40 hours next week. It's more defined up front in the way that it is needed and expected. And that's the way we carry out the relationship. So,
Okay.
does that
Yeah,
answer?
I've been in my former career as a sales engineer, technical sales manager kind of person. I was recruited once by a headhunter, and I want to go back to that term in a bit.
Yeah.
But I had an experience being and I've also worked with agencies similar to yours. I think yours is probably much better than what I dealt with, but those were very transactional. They were much more interested in the nuts and bolts, and they didn't have any interest in the life of the person. They just wanted to know, okay, what do you need? And here they are. Here's what we're going to present to you. And sometimes they try to shoehorn somebody that wasn't a really good fit.
Yeah.
So I want to get to that as well, because that was very annoying. I said, no, I need these skills. Well, what about this guy? But one thing I would say is, like, you are doing a big service to these organizations, and you're building a lot of you're enabling technology growth and transfer, which is amazing. So what about AI? Is that something that is pervasive in your market?
Yep. We are seeing more and more AI popping up, and we're using it ourselves. So it's interesting. We need to do more, I think, and to educate ourselves more internally on how we can use some of the AI tools. We met with a client last week that was talking about how they went in and, like, they're really eating the AI dog food and doing everything AI. Building out their their marketing campaign, their pitch deck, to taking their pictures and all the things, right? Building their logo, literally everything. For us, we do work within the technology sector. And on one side, it's med device, biotech, healthcare is one of our big lanes. And then the other is aerospace and satellite imagery. And then a few others in the middle, right? So when the customer is a good partner to work with, we say yes. And so for us, that means we're always learning, and we can't be an expert in all things. So if there's a new opportunity that comes in that we need to learn about, we're using ChatGPT to understand what are some smart questions that we can ask. How do we get to know that specific skill set and vertical and what is meaningful and important? So it shortens our guessing cycle as we go about identifying talent and talking with people in a way that is meaningful, both on the customer side and the consultant side. Sometimes we will build out materials around what is appropriate in a new market, right? We sometimes get asked to perform in markets that we're not currently working in. And so we need to do some due diligence around, how do we utilize the proper tools? And we go and do our research, and then we chat GPT to see what other answers come up. So that's
Great.
the biggest one today. But a lot of companies are using AI in our industry to do initial sales outreach and initial recruiting outreach. And people are using AI tools to apply and to better their resumes, which makes things really interesting when you get 300 applicants in 20 minutes to a posting that you put out.
That is crazy. How long have you had Radiant, by the way?
So Radiant is 3 years old. So I built a company previously and sold that off, and this is my second go round. So
okay, so you've been in the staffing industry 15 plus years, right?
Yes, I have.
Do you? And this goes to that demographics question. How do you see the differences in on both sides, both the companies you're working with and the people that are applying or that you're working with to place, like the actual people? How much have you seen change demographically in the past 15 plus years? Are you seeing older people, younger people? Obviously, the whole remote work stuff is massive now as well. Tell me
Yeah.
about all that.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I do think just the entire landscape is changing, right? And so when you talk about demographics, for sure uh, there is a large percentage of the workforce that is working longer. We don't have the retirement plans, the pension plans, all the things that were in place, and cost of living is more expensive,
Right.
and people want to work. It's meaningful and engaging and keeps you sharp. And so I think the biggest thing that we have seen is in education, right? The middle of the workforce is always appealing on the client side because there's some experience and there's also room for advancement and longevity. And then there's education on both sides of, especially for the companies to say, well, why would I want this person that has 30 years in their career to come in and do an individual contributor role? And the response to that is, why not? What do you have to lose? You have somebody that has amazing experience that can help train the less experienced workers and bring them up. And then the same thing goes for those recent grads, or I think the other side of that is that the recent grad is not as much of a checkbox as it used to be, right? You don't have to graduate college to be able to jump in and do a great job in a high-paying role with a great company. So I don't know if that fully answered the question, but there's still a lot of movement within the workforce and the demographics, and how to just bring great people together without having those biases around their age, their ethnicity, and everything else.
Right. That's the B word. I love the B word.
Yeah.
And it's another one of the sort of the core tenets at Spark Partners. We talk a lot about removing bias and how really detrimental it can be to a leader's vision. And I myself have, in my previous position leading my company, I basically faced bias, both personally as well as some of my managers would not hire somebody because they were outside of their little beautiful box.
Yeah.
They were too old or too weird or too young or too this or too that. And I would always say, well, why don't we just forget about the presentation and look at the substance? What is the substance? What can they actually contribute? And so that was a big shift for us.
Yeah.
And it really helped me. I mean, we hired some people that were considered weird or out of the box, and they ended up being amazing employees. So that was a really good time for us.
I like that.
Let me ask this. So if, say for instance, I am the CEO of a company, but say for instance, let's just use me. Say for instance, I have a need for an optical engineer with a really solid background in software.
Okay.
And mechatronics. I want them to be able to take lenses and be able to use software to move the lenses and blah, 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 and lasers and all that.
Yeah.
And I've got choices. I've got people that I know that are in the big boys, and I've got you now in my network. Sell me as to why MollyGravatt, as CEO of Radiant Dev, should be written on my check when I transact the deal with you.
All right. So the thing that we use to set ourselves apart is what we hear from our customers, right? And which is our customers are our consultants and our business clients. And the thing that we hear that we're excited about over and over again is that we do bring that personal touch, that white glove service to the table. We make the process simpler, easier, more manageable. Everyone is so busy these days, right? And there are 1,000 things to do. And, most people don't like to look at the cost and like, why am I paying you for this service? Well, what does it cost you if you don't hire this engineer? And they don't look at the work that's being picked up by all of the others that are staying later, that are getting fed up with, with the extra work and lift. And then also sometimes companies make their employees do the searching. And, it's a full-time job to find the talent that you need. And going back to what I said earlier about how much of a difference that each hire can make it's just so important. And so that's the one thing on the client side. And on the consultant side, we love it that we hear that they are not just a name and a number, right? We help them prepare, we help vet and understand, hey, this isn't going to be the right fit for you because of these 5 reasons. Let's keep in touch for something that will be a better fit for you. But when it is, we help prepare them. We help them understand, show up, look your best, be your best, be early, take notes on, what you think is going to be important, and do your research up front. They when people are looking for a job today, they're interviewing sometimes 20 times a month if they're lucky, right? And it is seriously a full-time job for them, and they feel like a number and like they don't matter. And we help give them a better voice and preparation for the interview process and the opportunity at hand.
That's a great answer, and it's a great. You sold me. I'm gonna write you a check. We talk at Spark.
I can't wait.
Yeah, here it is. I got it right here written for you. I'll just go ahead and mail it for you.
Nice.
At Spark Partners, we talk a lot about these big trends that are happening. Right? We talked about AI and all these other things, but there's also a trend right now towards less globalization, more nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
Do you compete with the Upworks and the near sourcing and outsourcing, hey, hire an engineer from Pakistan, that sort of thing?
We have, I feel like work and business is so much about trends, right? You see things shift really far in one direction and then they swing way back in the other. And so there has been a lot of offshoring and outsourcing and nearshoring. And more recently, we have, when customers say that, we say, okay, why are you doing that? And have them explain the reason behind it. And then we say, okay, if this is budget based and you have the work that needs to be done, what if we look at US, and this can't always be the case, right? If you want people on site, depending on location, there's some nuances to that, right? There's cost of living and wage equity that has to be in place. But for a lot of the remote roles that we're working on within the software industry, we're challenging those customers to say, okay, if you have $60 an hour or $90 an hour or whatever that number is for a specific skill set, let us go find you what you need for that rate and see what we can deliver as a comparison, because there's a lot of people in remote or rural areas that, especially that moved during COVID and said, they maybe paid off a house and, they're living within means that they want to live in, and they're willing to work for less, and they're grateful for that opportunity. Yeah. And it ends up being a win-win for everybody. So yes, we are seeing some variance. We are not doing offshore or nearshore, but we are competing in a few different instances when customers agree to go that path.
Yeah, that's good to know. And, we talk a lot about value and value delivery. And I think the value that you're bringing to your clients on both sides is pretty clear. While some people are going more automated, more robot, more nearshore, offshore, you're actually putting on that white glove. Bespoke is another word that's been used, bespoke or boutique, right? We're wrapping up here in the next couple of minutes, but I want to know, tell me a juicy story. Okay, you can redact it, you can change the names and all that. Tell me a story where something went terribly wrong and you lost a big deal, or you had a situation where a bluebird came out of nowhere and you were able to throw a Hail Mary. Tell us something juicy.
Yeah. So this is very early days in my career. And it was actually 9/11, post 9/11, where things were so strange. And I was working with a very big telecom company. And they were my only client because it was the way that the company had set it up. If you had some big clients, you were meant to focus and farm and drill down to every single level within that organization. And so that was my baby. And I was called into the office to meet with several of the engineering leaders, managers, VPs, directors. And, I sat at this table and I was so nervous. I met with all of them individually, but I was still, I was in my 20s. And they said, we have to let all of your people go, which meant, all of my earnings were going out the window. And, and I had to take a deep breath and I just wanted to cry. Like literally, I just wanted to cry at that table. And I held it together and I said, okay, tell me why. What does this mean? What are the end dates? What do we need to know? Do you think things will open? I got it together and asked some significant questions. And then I went out in my car and cried. But the other side of that was one of the biggest lessons in my career that I try to remember today. And, several others within my team and my office were impacted. And somebody was like so angry about how much they were losing. And I said, look at all of these people. So at my core, I'm the underdog and I like to fight for other people. I won't always speak up for myself, but so many people that we had just asked to relocate or that didn't have a job, like we still had jobs, right? We were still earning, we were still okay. And I said, we need to get it together. We have to give notice to these people and treat them with care and respect. And then the fallout of that's where I found my first leadership voice. And then, after the fact, remembering that how you care for people when you're not expecting something from them in life and in business is so important. So, building back up from that, crash in my earnings was a huge lesson. And when I try to keep in the back of my mind when I connect with people.
Wow, that's one hell of a story. That's definitely the story behind the story. And so this has been a great pleasure. We could talk for another few hours, I'm sure. But I really appreciate your time, Molly, and really being open and authentic with us and sharing some really good insights. And the number of just nuggets of wisdom in this one podcast, this 35-minute podcast, is immeasurable. So thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here and look forward to more interactions.
Absolutely. Well, with that, Molly, we will talk to you soon. And take care.
See you. Bye.